Welcome, everyone. We're just going to wait a minute while everybody comes in through from the waiting room. It takes a few minutes.
Okay.
So if you're just coming in, welcome. We're just waiting for everyone to arrive. We have a large group and it's just going to take a minute for everyone to make their way into the Zoom room. So it looks like we still have a large number of people coming in right now. So I'm just going to give us another minute or so while everyone arrives.
Your face isn't on there, is it?
Yeah, it is.
It is?
Uh-huh.
How'd you get it there?
Oh, and also my mute.
So Jennifer, I just muted everyone to get us started, and that included you. So I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself.
Good, great. All right. It's a couple minutes afternoon. I know there's probably some people still arriving, but I want to welcome you all to our webinar on our digital capacity grants. And just note that we will be recording this event. So my name is Jennifer Hallwit, and I'm a program officer at Mass Humanities. And I'm here with Catherine Stevens, who's our director of grants, and she'll be helping to answer some questions as we go along. I just want to also let you know that my internet has been a little unstable this morning. And so if for some reason we have problems with it, Catherine will take you through what we have planned a little bit more quickly so that you can ask your questions, and then I will record the whole thing more fully and send that out. So I want to let you know that for more information on our digital capacity grants, the link here is the page to go to for information. Right now we have up there the grant guidelines and frequently asked questions. We have the key application questions kind of all summarized and the apply button. And next week we're going to be adding to that page the recording of this webinar, this PowerPoint, so you'll have access to it, the sample budget that we're going to look at today. We're also going to give you a link to sign up for 10-minute consultations with us as you're working on your application. If that's something that would be helpful for you, look for that early next week. And then we also created a how to apply video for those of you who've not used our online system before to show you how to set up an account. So that will also be going up early next week. So in this webinar, we are going to cover some of the information that you need to know about our digital capacity grants. And I am going to replicate some of the information that is in our grant guidelines, but I want to use this webinar also to give you some additional information that you won't find on the grant guidelines. In particular, we're going to talk more about the types of projects that will be suitable for this grant line. We'll talk about how to answer some of the most important application questions. And we're going to look at a sample budget and then, of course, take your questions as well. We'll have questions about 20 minutes in and then questions again at the end of this webinar. And I created this PowerPoint so that it can be used as a reference after this event, including for people who were not able to make it. And so it's a little bit more information heavy than a normal PowerPoint might be. Okay. I will also, right after this webinar today, I will send you all the PowerPoint so that you have access to it quickly. I just want to mention our upcoming grant opportunities. So our digital capacity grants is what we're going to be talking about today. We have Bridge Street sponsorships also coming up in March. These are going to be specifically for history organizations, and they will give you $500 per online public program, and you can apply for up to 3 of them. You can apply for them all at once if you'd like. That application is going to open up March 1st. There will be rolling awards through September 27th, though because it's rolling, it probably is a better idea to apply for those earlier rather than later. And you'll be notified within 3 to 4 weeks. It's going to be a very simple, short application. We will also have a summer grant opportunity, and the details about that will be announced in the future. We have not made decisions on all the details about that yet, but we can tell you that the notification will be the week of September 20th. So today, the focus of this webinar really is on our digital capacity grants. I will be saying a little bit more at the very end of the webinar. If you're a current grantee, to help you understand, which of these grant lines you can apply for if you still have an open grant. And I'll also talk a little bit at the very end if you're interested and think you might want to apply for more than one of these grants, to give you some information on that. So why digital capacity grants? I want to say just a little bit about our rationale for this grant line. We created it to be responsive to the ongoing need during the pandemic to create digital programs. And also we wanted to respond to what the future might look like once the pandemic ends. So we know that digital programming and platforms are here to stay because they increase access to humanities programs for so many people, and also because they create larger audiences for organizations like yours. So we suspect that hybrid programs that bring in-person events to both an in-person and a virtual audience at the same time are probably going to become more common. And this grant line was really created to help your organization build its digital capacity to meet the needs that you imagine you're going to have in the upcoming year and beyond. So maybe you want to continue to offer the kind of digital programming you've been offering, but you want it to be more professional looking. Maybe you want to develop the capacity for hybrid programs, or maybe you have other ideas about how you want to develop new digital platforms to reach your constituents. So that's really what this grant line is for. Okay, so the deadline for this grant, for the application for the digital capacity grants, is February 7th at 11:59 p.m. So that is the deadline. The amount requested, you can request anything up to 5,000. You can request a smaller amount, and really what we'll be looking for is that you have a reasonable budget for what your proposed project is. I'll say quickly here that we do require a 1-to-1 match, and I'll be saying more about what that is later on, but basically you'll need to have a match that's equal or greater than what you're asking from us in terms of funding. And that will be a combination of cash share and in-kind, and I'll explain what those are for those of you who don't have a lot of experience applying for grants. For current grantees, if you have an open grant right now, you're not eligible to apply for this grant unless you have submitted your final report by January 29th. The one exception for that are our 2020 support grantees. So if you have a 2020 support grant, that was for operating funds, and you are eligible to apply for this even if you have not completed your final report. Okay, so this is a project-based grant. So those of you who got CARES Act funding last year or 2020 support grants, those were for operating funds. So I just want to kind of highlight and name that this grant is not for operating funds. It's project-based, although it will be helping you to build capacity for future humanities-based digital projects. So I just want to quickly go over some of the basic parameters for this grant line. So first of all, you should have defined goals, and we're going to be asking you what those are. And I think you can think about those in a twofold way. You want to have a goal for this project as a humanities project. So what are your goals in terms of the, let's say, the kind of content, the humanities content for this project, or perhaps in terms of the kinds of things you want to get people thinking about. But you also want to have defined goals for it as a capacity building project. So in what ways are you hoping to build capacity to deliver digital programming or capacity on your staff to do that? These projects should have a start and end date, and the grant period can be up to 1 year. That means that you don't have to offer something new. You can be offering something new that you haven't done before, or you may have a kind of a regular program that you offer, maybe a few times a year, but you're going to ask for granting for, one of those programs, let's say, that you maybe regularly offer, and what you're going to be doing new with it is going to be using it to develop your capacity for offering it in a digital format, perhaps. So it doesn't have to be something entirely new that you've never done before, but you're going to be doing something new with it in some way. And that's what makes it a project. It's going to have this sort of defined start date and end date. Projects for this grant need to be open to the public or to K through 12 students. So, you know, the way that we'll know that it's going to be open to the public is that you tell us you're going to be advertising it on your website, and you're going to be making it widely available. So your organization may have particular set of constituents that tend to come to your events or your programs. And they may be the ones who are going to be most likely to attend your funded events, but you just want to make sure that it is, you know, accessible and advertised to a wider constituency. Or you can be offering a program or project that's for K through 12 students, as long as you're serving a fairly large number of students. This grant is not open to schools as applicants, but we know that many of your organizations have programs that serve K through 12 students. And so it doesn't not need to be open to a broader public if you're primarily serving that population. The project must primarily serve Massachusetts residents, but we all know that online programming reaches across state lines and even, you know, globally. And so it's fine if you have audiences coming who, you know, are a national or an international audience, as long as you're primarily intending to be serving Massachusetts audiences. The programming that you offer as a part of, you know, the funded event, as a part of this project, the funded project, needs to be free for participants or users. If you are a theater and you're thinking of applying for this grant, to produce maybe some online programs that are connected to a production, you can apply for this grant. You are eligible. However, if you're charging a price for people to attend the production that this programming will be connected to, and you know, we imagine that you will be charging, then the audience, you can't sort of set it up where the audience needs to have seen the production in order to be able to really understand and follow the event, or to be able to even attend the event. And you'll want to make sure that your online programming that we're funding is offered free to the public, and that it's promoted widely to an audience that goes beyond those who pay for the production. So those are just some of the things you want to explain for us in your application to show us the ways in which it's going to appeal to a broader audience, and that you're going to do that kind of outreach to a broader audience. Projects should meaningfully engage with the humanities. And I'm just going to point you to our grant guidelines, and particularly the FAQ at the end of the grant guidelines, where we give you a definition of the humanities, and where we talk about how to think about interdisciplinary projects that maybe kind of combine arts and humanities or arts and social sciences. So you'll see more information there. And then finally, these grants must use digital programs or platforms for the humanities components of the projects. So, you know, you want to just be really sort of clear that whatever you're asking to develop the digital capacity for is going to be the humanities piece of what this project does. So what reviewers, the review committee will be looking for once you've submitted your applications. The review criteria I've put in the left column here, and just read that carefully. Those are the things that we'll be looking for. You want to make sure that your application is going to you know, show us those things. And then once we've figured out and kind of read all the applications and assessed them, and kind of identified which ones we think are the strongest applications, then on the right column there are Mass Humanities priorities. Then we'll sort of think about, you know, okay, we want to make sure that we're giving some priority to smaller organizations, that we're thinking about distributing funds throughout the state, and that we're, you know, looking at making sure we're granting funds to a variety of types of projects. That does not mean that you don't have a chance if you're a larger organization with more than 5 employees. You certainly can apply. It just means that we're going to be giving some priority to making sure that we're funding smaller organizations. So I want to give you some examples of eligible projects, just to give you an idea. This is not a limitation. It's just to begin to open up your ideas of the kinds of things that would be eligible for our digital capacity grants. So, you know, you may be a museum or a community organization, and maybe you want to create a permanent digital version of one of the humanity exhibits so that you can have that on your website. In this case, the purpose of that program, beyond the kind of humanities the delivery of the humanities content might be to expand access to your exhibits and to develop your capacity for digitizing your exhibits in the future. And you're going to use this grant to do that. You might be an historical society that wants to create a professional quality video of a program that you usually do in person for K through 12 students. So that might also include maybe digitizing the archival documents and objects that the students would look at when they come, on their field trip to your historical society. In that case, the purpose would be to expand access to this program and build capacity for creating professional quality videos in the future. Maybe you're an immigrant services organization and you want to create a free app to help students in your citizenship classes learn about American history and government. And maybe you're going to partner with the Massachusetts Immigrant and Refugee Coalition to help you meet your match and to distribute this app to other immigrant services organizations. Again, that's a particular constituent that you are wanting to deliver this app to, but again, you want to kind of make sure that you are appealing to a broader audience. So maybe you're going to also advertise the app to K through 12 students, who are from immigrant families, or maybe you're going to distribute to the general public because learning more about American history, it could be fun for everyone. The purpose in this case for you might be to help immigrants better internalize the information they need to know to pass the new citizenship test and expand your organization's digital humanities offerings. And I'll just give 3 more quick examples here. Maybe you're a library and you want to produce a series of 3 online public humanities programs. And you've been doing this before, but you're not happy with the, some of the quality pieces of it. And so what you want to learn how to do is to really create more professional Zoom events than you've been able to do in the past. Maybe you're an historical society and you want to digitize your most important archival collections, those with the highest demand, but you have a website that's really not set up to be able to do that. And so the purpose for this digital capacity grant for you would be to actually redo your website so that your organization can use it as a digital platform in the future for providing more access to your collections. And I just want to say that we are allowing you to come to us for this grant to update your website if you are an organization whose primary mission is humanities-based. So if you're not primarily, if you're an arts-based organization or a community service organization, you can't come to us to redo your website. But we did want to create an opportunity for especially small historical societies who maybe really desperately need to redo their website to be able to be sort of in the 21st century in terms of what they can do digitally. This is an opportunity to do that. Finally, maybe you're a theater and you want to create a hybrid program of interest to the public, but also connected to a summer production. The purpose for you then would be to increase your capacity to offer humanities-based hybrid programs in the future. Okay, so who's eligible to apply? You have to be a 501c3 or be fiscally sponsored by a 501c3 or be a state or federally recognized tribe. And I want to say a little bit about fiscal sponsorship because we've changed some of the ways that we are approaching it in terms of our application. So for those of you who have applied to us in the past, I just want to kind of name that things have changed a tiny bit. So if you are going to be applying with a fiscal sponsor for this grant, we will be asking you to upload your fiscal sponsor agreement as part of the application. So that agreement will need to be current and it will need to state the responsibilities of both parties. Usually the fiscal sponsor is responsible for receiving and administering grant funds and ensuring that they're used correctly. For those of you who have applied to us in the past and been grantees in the past, we've changed the way that we're having you name who the applicant organization is. It used to be that the fiscal sponsor was the applicant in our online system. Now it is the organization that is running the program. That is the applicant. And when you get to the partner application where it asks if you're a 501c and you say no, then it will ask for the name of your fiscal sponsor. So just to know that that's a change. And because of that change, what we are also asking if you are applying for a digital capacity grant, if you have applied to or received funding in the past from us, where you were using a fiscal sponsor, if you could just send us an email to the grants email right here, just to let us know, because we want to kind of reassociate those old applications with kind of you as the organization that's now applying, if that makes sense. So just send us an email if you have in the past applied through a fiscal sponsor and we'll kind of reassociate you in our system. Okay, in terms of who's not eligible for this grant, applicants cannot be individuals. We are saying that government agencies or entities cannot apply. However, in terms of libraries, libraries are often funded, in large part by town governments, but they often also have nonprofit foundations who raise money for them to be able to run things like online programs. So it is okay if you have a library nonprofit foundation or friends group, you can apply for this grant. Universities, colleges, and academic departments are also not eligible to apply. And so because we've been getting a few questions on that, I just wanted to explain that. So we had a question about whether a university entity could kind of find a fiscal agent and apply through the fiscal agent. And you can't do that if you are a university, a department or an institute at a university. It is possible that you may be working on a project in partnership with a 501c3, and that 501c3 could be the applicant organization. What we'll want to see is that the project is mainly serving the applicant organization, and it's mainly helping to build the digital capacity of the applicant organization. Okay, so I'm going to stop right here and ask if there are any questions. And Catherine has been, I think, surveying the questions that are coming in. Catherine, do you want to chime in here and give some answers to questions that have been coming up?
So it looks like most of the people in the chat are simply announcing themselves, telling us where they're coming from. I did get a question, about if someone has a current grant open, maybe that we gave in 2019, if they can apply, and the answer is you need to complete the project and submit the final report by January 29th in order to be eligible to apply.
Great. Okay.
I'm seeing questions come in now. Okay, here we go. Let's see. So the end date for the project. So typically our grants are for 12 months. We understand that sometimes there is a little bit of flexibility, 1 or 2 months. Later than that, obviously it can be shorter. So that's a typical grant period for us. So I have a question. I've applied for an LCC in Randolph and I'm waiting for a result. Can I apply? The answer is yes, you can. If you are, you can be an applicant to other Mass Cultural Council funded organizations, but I think Jennifer will go over this. If it is, you couldn't make the match with Match Humanities with project-based funding from Mass Cultural Council, but you're welcome to be applying to them for other projects or programs that you're doing. Okay, let's see. This presentation will be available after. Yes, we'll be sending a recording of it. And we will also be, of course, capturing all these questions in the chat. So if there's one that's really common that's coming up for a lot of folks, we'll also send those responses. So Jennifer, is there anything else in the chat that you've seen that you think we should, we can respond to right now?
No, because I'm recording, my windows are all different. And so I actually can't see the chat right now, but
Can we ask questions or not?
I think we want to hold, we want to hold questions till, we will do this again at the end, but I want to make sure that Jennifer goes through the rest of the slideshow, which might answer some of these questions.
Yeah, so it sounds like, why don't we move on now, and then we'll take more questions at the end. So if, as we're going along, feel free to type your questions into the chat and we can take them that way. All right, so I'm going to move on. I want to now look at some of the key application questions and just, give you a little bit of guidance on answering those. One general tip, which any of you who've applied for grants probably already know, but if you have not done a lot of grant writing before, one of the key things to always be thinking about is just to read the application questions carefully and to really include in your answer each element that we ask for in that question, to be really attentive to that. So for instance, the project narrative question is probably the longest question that you will be writing about in this application. And so I've given on the left here the directions that we give in the application, and I've kind of color coded them a little bit, but you can see that we're asking you for 5 different things. And I think you have about 6,000 characters. So it's you have a decent chunk of space to do that. And what I've done is I've just taken what those key points are and I've put them in the right column here. So let's see. The goal or purpose of the project, you'll want to make sure that you mention. Deliverables, be as specific as you can on what the deliverables are. So if you're going to be doing an online series, let's say maybe 3 programs, you want to tell us things like who are you imagining the potential speakers and moderators might be. You don't have to have final decisions. We know you don't have time to do that, but maybe give us some names of realistic people who you think, who you're likely to reach out to first to be speakers and moderators. If you have potential dates, we're imagining this is going to be in July, general kind of dates, give us those, and definitely tell us what the topics are. What's the general topics or themes that you're imagining these events will be describing. Digital format, you want to tell us what that is, intended audiences, and then why the intended audience will be interested in your project. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples here. Let's take that first type of project that I described earlier. This is going to be, we're imagining a community organization here that has a kind of an arts center, and they have produced in the past an exhibit with a lot of photographs on global Chinatowns, all around the world. This is based on a past grant, so I'm loosely adapting. And they want to use this grant to learn to develop their capacity for digitizing exhibits. So the goal or purpose of this project then would be to expand access to this exhibit, to increase its longevity by creating a digital version, of course, to preserve images of global Chinatowns, right, the kind of content of their exhibit, and to increase staff capacity for digitizing exhibits. And so what I'm doing here, just to say, is this isn't going to be your full answer, but I'm trying to at least gesture towards the kind of things that you want to cover in that answer. In terms of deliverables, you might say that we're going to have a new page on our organization's website with the digital exhibit. It's going to include 15 photographs and accompanying text from the exhibit. And you might elaborate later that your project director, your humanities kind of person is going to be kind of curating what to choose from the exhibit and kind of thinking about what the rationale for that is. It will also include the recording of an online panel discussion of the exhibit that you're going to produce as part of the funded project. Again, you're going to name potential panelists. And then another deliverable is going to be completion of staff training in digitizing exhibit items and in making additions to the website with trainings offered by, and maybe you have the name of a IT consultant who's going to train your staff and how to kind of get into the back end of your website, let's say, and learn what they need to know to digitize exhibits in the future. Digital format here would be the web pages featuring the exhibit, as well as the recording of the online panel event, which maybe is going to be linked to your YouTube channel. For intended audiences, maybe it's Chinese Americans in Massachusetts interested in understanding the global phenomenon of urban Chinatowns. Secondary audience might be those of the broader diasporic communities in the US and around the globe interested in this topic. Why the intended audience will be interested in your project. You might talk about how gentrification and changing migration patterns means that many Chinatowns, including in Boston, are losing their residents and identities. And it's really important to capture their stories, to situate the photographs in the context of kind of a global China phenomenon. And this is something that meets the demand in API communities to better understand their own histories in a global perspective. So again, you're just wanting to kind of help us understand this is important, why there's demand for it. I'm going to give you one more example in the project narrative category here of a second case study. So this would be a theater in New Bedford that has the dance performance coming up of Jessica Lange's 1,000-Yard Stare, which was about the experience of veterans. And you want to create a hybrid event with a panel of veterans, of 4 veterans and a moderator. And so you want to kind of use that event to really learn how to develop your capacity for doing hybrid events. And again, this is very loosely based on a project that we funded in the past, not the hybrid part of it. So the goal or purpose would be to offer New Bedford residents a free hybrid event on the experience of veterans once they return home, and to develop staff capacity at our theater for creating hybrid events. The deliverable would be that you've completed staff training and using a hybrid platform. And again, naming the company that you're thinking perhaps of going with in terms of a hybrid platform. The platform is is purchased and integrated into the website, and the theater produces one hybrid event, the multi-generational panel with 4 New Bedford veterans. Digital format would be the platform that you're going to be using to produce your hybrid events. And maybe it's going to be integrated into your website. And the video of the event maybe is going to be uploaded to your YouTube channel and posted on your website. That would be an example. Intended audiences. So the audiences who attend the dance performance, because this is connected to a production. Again, you're telling us, yes, letting us know tickets, you are going to be charging tickets for the dance performance. But this is also for a broader audience beyond the audience for that production. It's also for veterans and their families in New Bedford and beyond, interested in understanding their experiences in a broader context. And maybe you have an outreach plan. You're going to do outreach with the Veterans Transition House in New Bedford, which serves homeless and at-risk veterans. And you're going to work with them to put this event on a big screen at their facility, with social distancing, let's say, so that they can kind of be part of it, and maybe their clinicians are going to be on hand for anyone who needs support. Why the intended audience will be interested in your project. You might talk about the fact that veterans comprise about 5% of the New Bedford population. Giving veterans a voice and a platform for their experiences really helps empower them, and also helps the New Bedford community learn how they can better support veterans. And you might mention that there's was a series of features in the New Bedford Standard Times last year. I'm making this up, but that's really increased the visibility of veterans in your community, and you're hoping that the moderator is going to be that journalist who did that series. Okay, so another question that we wanted to go over is the humanities engagement question. And you're going to be asked here to describe how your project engages Massachusetts residents with humanities content and or conversations. So if we come back to that veteran experience case study that we were just talking about, the sample answer for what you might say about humanities engagement, I'm just going to read it here. The experiences of New Bedford's veterans after returning from their military deployment will be explored on the panel. The conversation will help the audience understand both the variety of veterans' experiences and how they've changed over the past few decades. Because this is multi-generation, there'll be some sense of change over time. The conversation will also engage the audience in meaning making about who we are as a community in New Bedford. How did these veterans experience their reception in New Bedford in the months and years after they came home? What commitments do we in New Bedford want to make to those who have served in our country through military service? To come together as a community is to listen is to engage in civic work, a process of giving voice to those who are often not heard and of exploring what better serving their needs might look like. So that would be kind of one way that you might think about describing the kind of humanities dimension of your project. The other question we want to go over is the digital capacity development question. So we're asking, what weaknesses or needs in your organization's digital capacity will this program allow you to develop and use for future humanities programs? Again, I've written up a sample answer here for that Global Chinatown exhibit project that we were talking about earlier. So an answer might be, we are a community organization that provides a range of services to the API community in our city. Our Arts Center has extensive experience producing exhibits that attract community members and tourists, but until now, we've not created digital exhibits. And again, I'm making this up. The COVID-19 epidemic has helped us to see how our exhibits can have a bigger impact if we digitize them, but our staff does not have the equipment or computer skills to do the work ourselves. We would like to use a digital capacity grant to develop the skills and purchase the necessary equipment. This will include hiring, name of potential consultant or trainer, who will offer a day-long training, which we will record for future employees on how to use WordPress to create a professional-looking digital exhibit on our website. We also hope to learn how to set up interactive features we can use in future exhibits. So again, you just want to really tell us, what's the need that's there, and how do you want to use this grant to meet that in terms of developing digital capacity. I want to say just a little bit briefly about personnel. So we're going to be asking you to describe who your project personnel are, the main people who will be doing the work for this project. And there's 2 things that we want you to tell us. We want you to tell us their role in the project. So tell us the kinds of things they'll be doing to contribute to the project work. And then tell us something about their qualifications. We're not going to be asking you to upload their CV or their resume. So we're just asking for a brief description here in terms of their qualifications. And if you have a link to an online profile, if it's a faculty member, maybe their page at their university or maybe their LinkedIn profile. If you have that, it's helpful for us. We are going to also ask you about your humanities personnel. We're looking for the name of probably just one person here who's got the kind of main person who's going to be responsible for overseeing the humanities dimensions of your project. And we're going to ask you for any additional information that might help us understand why you think they're a good person to be overseeing the humanities content. So if they were already mentioned in the project personnel above, you're going to be adding a little bit here to tell us more about their humanities sort of experience or qualifications. And I just want to name here that for those of you who've come to us in the past, you're used to us asking for a project scholar. And this is a little bit broader understanding of the humanities personnel than the definition of project scholar we've had in the past. So it may be that a specialized person with a PhD who teaches at a university is just what you want, but you don't have to do that. It may be that there's someone on staff, maybe your executive director, maybe your program manager who has a humanities degree, who has some experience doing humanities programs, who knows your collections perhaps, and that person is really the best person to be overseeing this project. Maybe it's community people. There might be a journalist who you think is going to be someone who would work well, maybe a tribal leader, maybe even a community organizer who has a deep understanding of your communities and kind of understands their needs in a kind of broader humanities context. So we are kind of widening our definition here of how we're approaching the idea of the person who oversees the humanities dimensions of your project. All right, let me say a little bit about budget. So I wanted to give you some ideas of the kinds of things that this grant can cover and pay for. It's not the full list of possibilities, but it's an idea for some of the kinds of things that can be covered by this grant. So, maybe you want to hire a summer intern who has some of the kind of expertise to do some of the things that you want to help you develop your capacity. You can use this funding to hire a scholar, to hire a trainer, a consultant, maybe a videographer, maybe a video editor. If there are fees for your staff to attend a training to develop their digital capacity skills, those fees can be covered by this grant. If, the kind of skill development that your staff needs or the project work that they're going to be doing, that takes up staff time. If you want to use our funds to cover the cost of their staff time, you can use our funding for that. Equipment that you might need to develop digital capacity. It needs to be for the humanities dimensions of the work that you'll be doing, but you can purchase equipment with this grant. So maybe you need a digital video camera, maybe you need a tripod, whatever it might be. As long as you have an argument for it and can show us that it's connected to the humanities work, then we can cover that. Subscription for a digital platform like Zoom or maybe the hybrid platform that you want to use, we can pay for the subscription during the grant period as long as it's directly connected to the the project that we're going to be funding. And then finally, staff time for outreach work on the project and for publicity and advertising. So if you're going to be doing staff time to reach out to a particular audience, those sorts of things we can cover. Okay, so requirements for project grants. I've just mentioned equipment purchased has to be connected to the humanities components. Let me say a little bit about the one-to-one match. I've already told you what a match is, and I just want to make sure that there's a good understanding of the difference between the cash share and the in-kind share. So a cash share is when money actually changes hands. The sources for your cash share might be your operating budget or maybe another grant that you're applying for. And if you're applying for another grant and you haven't received it yet, I'll show you on the budget form. You can just tell us that it's either secured or that you're still waiting to hear. And if you know when you're going to hear, you can put down when you know you're going to hear. The kinds of things that you might put in your cash share column could be employee work. So if you have salaried employees, that's going to go in the cash share column because you pay them a salary for the work that they're doing on the grant. You can put supplies, equipment, advertising costs, those sorts of things. The in-kind share is a cashless donation. So that includes things like volunteers' time. Usually that's at $30 an hour, although some people, it just makes, they clearly would be charging significantly more, and maybe you put down $50 an hour if they're a real specialist. Donated supplies, donated use of facilities, those sorts of things. They can't be your own facilities, but if somebody else is donating facilities to you, then that can all be part of the in-kind. At least 10% of your match must be in cash share. So if you're asking for a $5,000 grant, you'll need to have a $5,000 match, and that's going to be adding up your cash share plus your in-kind share. It needs to add up to 5,000. 10% at least must be in the cash share column. So that means $500 needs to be in the cash share column, could be more. And then finally, I just wanted to clarify something, and this is a little bit different from what you'll see in our grant guidelines. It's a little bit more precise. Mass Cultural Council, if you have project-based funding from Mass Cultural Council, that you cannot use as part of your cash share for this grant. However, we know that many of you have been receiving Mass Cultural funding this past year for operating expenses, as part of their kind of COVID relief response funding, and that you can count as part of your cash match. Okay, so I'm going to put up a sample budget. So I think I need to stop sharing here, and then I'm going to pull that up. Okay, so this is the budget form that you will access in the application. And I just want to give a quick overview for it. So this column right here is for Mass Humanities funds. These are the funds that you're going to be asking for from us. You're going to give an explanation in this column. This column is where you put your cash cost share. Here's where you explain that. Over here is your in-kind cost share, and here's where you're going to explain that. This column, you're going to add up horizontally, and it should all do this automatically because it's an Excel file. So you want to give us some detail. So for instance, if you have speakers, let's say this is the veterans grant that I was talking about earlier. You have 4 panelists, so you're going to be giving $100 per panelist. It's always good to name who it is that's being paid in the budget. So tell us, what their names are if you think that's who they're going to be. And then part of the stipend for the moderator, Selena Taveras, is going to be $100. We'll see over here that she's also donating some of her time as the moderator. If you have more than one thing, as we do here on the in-kind, you're going to sort of make sure that you divide it up so we can see, okay, Jose Ayala is a board member who's going to help set up the event platform on the website. That's going to be $750, and $200 here is for Selena Taveras. Indicated here 15 hours at $50 an hour. Probably I could have indicated here, the number of hours at $30 an hour, let's say something like that. If you have publicity costs, you can put those in. I've given some for Facebook boosts. Maybe you have an ad in the Times. That's going to be part of your cash share. Purchase of digital equipment. You can put that on the equipment line. Maybe you're going to split some of that between cash share and what you're asking from us. Your subscription, you can put that here for, let's say, it's, your platform or software you're going to be using. Maybe you really want to be serious about evaluation because you're trying to develop your capacity. You want to see how well it worked. You're going to, put some staff time in for that. And then we have another category here. I've added in right here that this one's going to be for training for this grant because you want to, the fee for the training for your staff to be trained. And you'll see it adds up here. You're going to be asking $4,150 for Mass Humanities. And you're stating that your cash share is going to be $3,360, and it only needed to be $500, but you are able to contribute more, your organization, to make your match. And then you have $1,100 in terms of your in-kind. And we see that that's what the whole project adds up to. I also wanted to just note here in the cash share column, you want to give us the source of the funding for the cash share, and you want to put it in brackets here. So in this case, it's your operating budget. Let's say you had a, I don't know, let's say a local cultural council grant. I have to think about whether that was project-based or not, but you had to use some other kind of funding.
I'll jump in and say, I think if you applied to a local family foundation for a grant,
yeah, right,
that would be, you might put in the Worcester Cultural Foundation.
Yeah, great. Yeah, thanks for that, Catherine. And again, if it is a grant, you want to indicate it's either secured or that you're waiting to hear on that. And we had a question ahead of time also, if you want to explain to us, how you're planning on making your match, if you are applying for some other grants, let's say, we have a question at the very end of the application on other things to add, and you could easily add that there. Okay. So I'm almost done, and then we're going to be able to take questions. If you have never applied for a grant from us and you're a little bit nervous trying to figure out how to use our online system, Catherine has created a short video presentation on how to create an account in our online system. And it's going to be posted on that same webpage that I gave you earlier, which is the webpage where we have our digital media grants. And we should have that up by next Monday. And then we just want to say a little bit about our upcoming grants in relationship to each other. So if you have a current open grant with us, for digital capacity grants, I've already indicated this. If you have an open grant with us, you'll need to have your final report in by January 29th in order to be able to be eligible for the digital capacity grant. The only exception is if you're a 2020 support grantee. In that case, you can still apply even if you have not submitted your final report, because that was for operating funds. The Bridge Street sponsorships, you can have an open grant and still be eligible for those. Those are a little bit less like a formal grant, and they're, so don't worry, if you have an open grant, you can still apply for a Bridge Street sponsorship. Our summer grant opportunity will be like, we'll be using the same policy that we've always had, which is that if you have an open grant, you need to have the final report in before that application deadline. And what I can say for now is that as long as you've completed your final report by late June, you will be, you should be safe. If you were thinking that you might want to apply for more than one of these grants, I just want to clarify how that works. So you can apply for a digital capacity grant and a Bridge Street sponsorship, as long as it's for two different projects. If you're thinking about applying for a digital capacity grant, but you might also want to apply for a summer grant, you can do that again as long as it is for two different projects. And again, as long as you have the final report for the digital capacity grants in by the end of June, so that you're safe then to apply for the summer grant. That means that, digital capacity, you'll hear notification will be end of, I think end of March. So you'll have just slightly under 3 months then to carry that out if you're thinking of also applying for a summer grant. And it might slightly reduce your chances to get the summer grant if you've already gotten a digital capacity grant, just so that you know that. If you receive a Bridge Street sponsorship, it is no problem to apply for a summer grant. You do not need to have completed all of the events that you applied for as part of the Bridge Street sponsorship to be eligible to apply for the summer grant opportunity. Okay, again, just know that they need to be separate. So, they can't be part of the same project. The summer grant couldn't cover anything related to the Bridge Street sponsorship events. So we're going to take questions in just a minute here, but if you have questions, additional questions after this webinar, please email us if you still have specific questions about the eligibility of your organization or of your project, and you can email us at our grants email right here, and you'll receive a response from one of us. If you start working on the application and you realize that you just have some questions about the application questions and how to kind of answer them for your particular project, we are going to be setting up office hours next week and the week after, and we're going to post the link to sign up for our office hours on the same webpage that I've been giving you. So look for that. I think we should have that up by Monday, but certainly early next week, and you'll be able to sign up for sort of 10-minute consultations, hopefully on Zoom, if we can figure out how to do that, otherwise, by phone. All right, I think we're ready for more questions now.
Okay, great. So I think we have a number of questions, just clarifying the budget requirements around our match. So just to clarify, we are asking you to match in total, meaning in total your cash share and the in-kind donated share, to match equal what you've asked of Mass Humanities. So that's that. So when Jennifer said, if you're asking $5,000 of Mass Humanities, $5,000 needs to come from a combination of that cash and in-kind share. So that could be, $4,500 in donated funds and $500 in cash. Right. So that total is $5,000. So I know we got that question in the chat. And again, if that's one of the ones you keep coming back to and you're not sure, you can email us, or I would actually suggest you have an opportunity signing up for a short consultation with one of us, which we'll be posting on the Digital Capacity Grant site next week. Another good question we got was one about professional development for social studies teachers. So this grant is really for publicly accessible programs, and since it's not for professional development for participants, so that would not qualify for this grant. I've been answering a lot of the questions in the chat, so what we'll also do is make sure that we get copies of we'll use the chat to create a sort of a webinar Q&A for everybody. So Jennifer, while I've been talking, I don't know if you've been able to see any questions that have come through.
Yep. So you do not have to have a SAM, be registered with SAM for this grant. So
Great.
Yay.
We're very excited about that. We're thrilled for all of you and for ourselves. And again, one of the common questions we've been getting is about matching with other kinds of funding. And so just to reiterate, you can make your match with grants from other foundations and other funders, and the one exception is Mass Cultural Council project-based funding. So that might be your local cultural council, or it might be a Mass Cultural Council project grant.
There's a question about a cultural festival and concert. So again, we can't, because of the distinction between the National Endowment of the Arts and the National Endowment for the Humanities, we're funded, you know, in terms of our staff and everything, we're funded by the National Endowment for the Humanities. And so we have to make a distinction between arts and humanities. And so that's why we don't fund the kind of creation of artistic products, whether that might be, you know, music or creation of art or the creation of a theatrical production. Those things we can't fund. So we couldn't fund, let's say, you know, the costs of having a concert at a festival. If it's a cultural festival that has significant kind of humanities elements to it, that could potentially, there could potentially be things that we might fund, and it might be better for you to kind of email me directly or email Catherine, you know, our grants email directly, and we can kind of, you know, get back to you with specifics for your organization on that.
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. I think the eligibility questions are always some of the toughest, and so we like to take our time to try to think through whether or not your particular project or organization really fits, and so email is often the best way for us to do that. We've also had a couple of questions about things that you've already purchased or work that's already been done, and whether that can be part of the project budget for this grant. And the answer is that anything that's happened outside of the period that you set for this grant cannot be part of the budget that you submit. So if it's work that happens, that has happened already, that you've already completed, it can't have any place in the budget that you submit to us. So if you've already purchased a piece of equipment, that purchase can't be in the budget for us. If it's something that you think is going to happen after the project is over, that also can't be in the budget. And the grant period, the application will ask you to set the start and end date of your project. So the start date has to be after the award date for this grant, which is the week of March 29th. So it has to be sometime after that is when you're going to start this project. It's typically within a few months, and it has to end typically within 12 months of that start date. So that's how you can think about when you're thinking about making your budget, keep those parameters in mind, because anything that happens outside of that can't factor into the budget.
I'm seeing a question about what kinds of formats can we apply to digitize, VHS, audio, archival. All of those could be things that you could apply for, as long as those, whatever's, you know, was originally in VHS, audio, or, you know, archival is humanities related, you know, so it has to have a humanities dimension to whatever the content of those are, but you could apply to be digitizing those. And I'm just reading through more questions here to see what else we haven't answered.
So we have a question about filmmakers putting together a kind of filmmaking kit for K-8 students. And I think what would make that project eligible is if that kit is really based in a humanities topic, right? So if that kit is really based around a subject matter for those students that is humanities based, then that could be eligible. But a kit that is for any kind of filmmaking would not be eligible.
And I think also as long as your organization was an eligible organization, you know, that you are an organization that's a 501c3 and you're not a school, those sorts of things. Yeah. There's a question here. We're hiring a person to specifically do digital content. Is there an allowable max for personnel costs? And there's no max for personnel costs. So, you know, really, we want you to think about what makes sense budget-wise for you to be able to both deliver, you know, humanities related kind of content or conversations, and also to expand your digital capacity. So a project could begin in April. You know, I think if there was public programming and you're not being notified until the end of March, if you're telling us you have a program the first week in April, but the grant funded work can't start on it, you know, that's probably not going to be realistic. So we just want you to kind of, you know, show us that whatever the start date is for your first funded program, let's say, public program, there's a realistic kind of time frame for you being able to do the work, you know, once you've been notified of the grant. So a question about audio history tour. Yes, you could develop an audio history tour. There's a great question here. If you know, for digitizing an exhibit that's already happened, you know, there's not as strong a humanities piece to the current project. And that is correct. And that's why I was sort of indicating that, you know, certain projects are going to need someone with more humanities expertise than others. So if you're digitizing a humanities exhibit that's already happened and there's not going to be a lot of changes, then the role of the humanities person might be more as the kind of curator, kind of choosing, you know, what are the really key things to kind of highlight, you know, in the digital exhibit, assuming that it's not going to be just, you know, replicating everything of the whole exhibit. So again, you know, we sort of recognize that the amount of new humanities content might vary depending on the project. There's a question about advocacy organizations, and you know, I think that's always tricky, and you know, I don't think we can give like a super hard line kind of explanation. But if, for instance, you're doing, you know, active advocacy for particular policies, you know, particular, you know, you want particular policies to pass, particular laws to get passed, and you do active advocacy for that, that would certainly qualify you as an advocacy organization. And, you know, write to us if you have more concerns, you know, because it is sometimes tricky. And federal grants can be used as a match for this, right, Catherine?
You know, that's one I want to double check with our finance officer on. So this is Mass Cultural Council funded, so we wouldn't have an issue of matching state funds with state funds, with federal funds, but I want to double check with our fiscal officer on that before I give an answer. And I think that's a great question. Thanks everyone for it.
Yeah, and we are expecting that we'll be adding to our FAQs based on the questions that we've been getting here.
And we've also had a question about funding large organizations. And I think we are prioritizing, when we say we're prioritizing small organizations, what we mean is that we'd really take into consideration the importance of funding a lot of different kinds of organizations and considering the different capacities that organizations have to do projects and complete applications. So we definitely can fund large organizations, but we want to always make sure and be very conscious of funding small organizations too, which is why we keep that in our priorities.
I also see a question about kind of public access TV. You know, does that count as a media organization? And I think we would say, yes, that does count as a media organization. And so public access TV is not eligible for this grant. And I think the reason is because we really want to focus on organizations that aren't used to using media and really need to develop some of their capacity for that. Whereas media organizations, you know, have I know that you have definite financial needs, but you know, you have more digital capacity than many of the organizations we're hoping to fund with this grant. Catherine, do you see other questions here that we haven't gotten to?
You know, there are other questions, and again, I think what we'll try to do is we'll update our FAQ. So we'll use the questions you've put in the chat and see if we can, you know, come up with very clear answers for everybody. And of course, you're welcome to email us at grants@masshumanities. And as we said, we will have those consultations in the next 2 weeks. And those consultations are, I think, really geared towards helping you figure out how to answer some of the questions in the application. So for eligibility questions, again, I think often email is the best because that gives us all time to check everything. Whereas in a short sort of consultation, what we really want to do is focus on how to explain your project in the application. So we are also at time now, and I want to say thank you so much, everyone, for coming, and really thank you to Jennifer for doing a really fantastic and informative and thorough presentation for everybody today. So we will be, of course, following up with a video and with these slides. So first you'll get the slides, and we'll be posting the video later. And we really look forward to reading your applications and hearing about all the amazing ideas you have for digital and hybrid programs. So thanks everyone for coming.
Yep, great. And enjoy. If you have snow, we have a beautiful winter wonderland out our windows here in Western Massachusetts. But yeah, again, thank you for coming, and enjoy the rest of your day. And we'll look forward to more contact and interaction with you in the next few weeks.